You know, sometimes content can come from the blandest of places. This video was gonna be simple. My house had some work done, and so I didn't put out anything in months. The idea was to ease back with a compilation vid of things that I'd consumed while being unable to create. There was, Ship of Arcanium for the PC, the ultimate way to play Ocarina of Time, and Fred Knudsen got another video up. Nice to see that the changes in workflow have worked out okay. Then there was Hello Kitty Island Adventure. I don't want to talk about it. And back in March I binged the entirety of questionable content. I like a webcomic and I love a long runner. Even if the content is disappointing, you can admire that it has been running with a measure of success for so long. People may not feel that excited about Season 22 of NCIS, or Episode 986 of SNL, or whatever The Simpsons is doing these days, but there's enough people with a baseline interest to sustain it. Webcomics are some of the more admirable long runners. At a baseline, an artist had to go through the trouble of setting up a website, commit to a schedule, and create in the hopes that they'd be found on a less connected, though smaller, internet. For every questionable content, Freefall, and Penny Arcade, there's a couple dozen others that never got any traction, or did but finish a respectable run sometime in the Obama years. Compared to Penny Arcade and Freefall, QC is relatively young. Creator Jeff Jacks published his first comic in August 1, 2003. Now, 2003 internet was still primarily a text and image-based medium. Downloading was the main way to share music and video, and downloads would take forever. I remember leaving my computer overnight to download a totally legitimate copy of a movie. Webcomics were suited to thrive with these constraints, and so Jeff made a lot of 200 strips in when he was already shipping merchandise and being asked to talk at universities. In a 2004 interview with Comixpedia, he revealed QC was receiving between 10,000 and 13,000 visitors a day. "It's definitely not paying the bills right now," he said, despite having quietly transitioned to working on it full-time. But what were all those people clicking in to see? Well, the comic by a man from Maryland with a BA in music living in Massachusetts stars Martin, a guy from California with a BA in music history living in Massachusetts. "I think all of the characters resemble me to some extent," he said in that same interview. I can't complain. Anyone who creates and claims not to insert even a little bit of themselves in it is lying, blind, got it out of their system 20 projects ago, or has no personality. And anyway, the first comic makes it clear that this isn't going to be just a retelling of a day in the life of Jeff Jacks, through the walking, talking PC that's there to greet him. That's Pint Size, an Anthro PC. At the moment, Anthro PCs are little more than comic relief, but that'll change in due time. While bar hopping and complaining about his lot in life, he meets Faye, a self-proclaimed indie girl who's new to town and blunt enough to start a friendship. Naturally, her apartment burns down and she starts bunking with Martin. Convenient. Also convenient, she works at the same coffee shop that he frequents and where another barista, lady I'm gonna be written out soon, has the hots for him. These are the first connections on the network that's the core of QC, a perpetually rearranging core that is so complex you'd need a chart to keep track of all of them. Here's the chart. Please take a moment to admire the chart. Honestly, I kinda like the chart. The chart made this video somewhat easier. What the fuck? The QC relationship map is one of the most fascinating things I discovered while making this video. Created by Peter Rasmussen in 2020, and updated until his departure from Twitter in June 2022, it documents how every character in the comic relates to one another, all while making the plot map for Primer look positively understandable. Keep in mind, this is now 2 years out of date. A lot of these lines need to be moved or relabeled, and Peter would need to add about a dozen characters in order to bring this mess up to date. How does Jeff manage to keep all of this straight? By checking his own webcomics wiki, of course. Martin's at the center of the map, but by 2022 it's only because he's grandfathered in. We're spared an eternal will they won't they around comic 500, when Faye's backstory and trauma following her father's suicide are revealed. And if you think that's spoilers, consider that we're talking about something published during the Bush administration. From then it becomes an ensemble comic with most characters gaining their own story arcs and motivations. The most recent arc, which we'll get to in a minute, was originally conceived as a way to get Martin and his girlfriend Claire out of the comic. To go through all that's happened in the comic would probably need a 20-year-long video. Instead, let's take a look at some of the more interesting characters and what happens to them. Brune gets introduced to us after Clinton gets dragged into a meet-cute with Emily by Claire. Look, doing all these introductions properly would need a lot of context, and this is a long video already. You ain't gonna be tested on who's who, so work with me here. She's working at a bar where Clinton goes to drown his sorrows and wish for a trouble-free night. Naturally, her workplace and apartment burned down after that. I swear this and Faye are the only two apartments that burned down in this comic. A blunt, silent type with poor social skills and an affinity for clocks, she does pretty well representing people on that end of the spectrum. After bonding with Clinton and moving with her longtime friend Renee, she gets a job at another bar. Jeff soon ran out of things he could think of doing with her, so she was last seen 1,000 or so comics ago. Bar none, one of my favorite characters in QC. She comes around in the 500s, smoking and with a look that screams, "I absolutely don't have OCD." This is later explained in universe as being on messed up medication, and out of it as Jeff figuring her out. And figure her out he did. She gets a lot of development throughout the comic. Social interaction really helps her as she finds her old job of counting things unfulfilling, and gets along with people well enough to request a new one at Coffee of Doom, where Faye works. Her father is responsible for most of the sci-fi elements on the comic, being behind the developments in the AI that became the Anthro PCs. 1,000 comics in, he sends Anders a prototype robot for her to use as a virtual boyfriend. 1,000 strips later, they are so common that a freelance web developer can buy one for her companion. I don't have proof that the singularity that happened in between those two is at least partially attributable to him, but I wouldn't be surprised. After her mother sent her an assistant as a bargaining chip, Anders cuts off any contact with her and decides to roam the earth for a while. I take this opportunity to note that Jeff did, in fact, note that this is firmly in the starter pack for a basic rich white woman. It also seemingly cured her of her OCD, removing it to the point of being an occasional gag and needing reminders for the audience at any rate. Proving that there's a middle ground between the ideal AI of Momo and whatever pint size is, May tried to steal $400 million to buy herself a fighter jet body. Sentenced to robot jail, she first appears as a hologram on probation before being assigned a body. Apparently enough time has passed between comics 2 and 3000 that robot bodies are common, have been for a couple of generations, and they're shitty models, because May's first is a bargain bin one that's prone to failure. This is a major part in causing Rocco, a former police officer with body dissociation issues after a robot crushed her original body, to start focusing her efforts on a non-profit helping underprivileged AI. Have you noticed how far away from the original concept we are? The biggest wasted opportunity in this comic and an incredible misstep. 3,300 comics in, Faye is looking for a way to save Bubbles, her new robot friend and future girlfriend. They met in Faye's new job at the illegal robot fighting ring after she got fired from Coffee of Doom because of alcoholism.
Everybody got that?
Bubbles is stuck there because of a Faustian bargain she did with Corpse Witch, who runs the fighting ring. To get rid of her PTSD, she accepted her offer to lock away any memories of her combat experience at the cost of her installing a key that would erase Bubbles as we know her unless she does as she's told. It's a tough one. Not even Hannelore and the most advanced AI shown hitherto can do anything about it. And out of nowhere comes this all-powerful AI with the ability to disable humans, reverse the harm caused to Bubbles, and reward Corpse Witch for breaking the one line even they wouldn't cross. A deus ex machina if there ever was one, but one that left a gem in its way, because Jeff had accidentally reinvented Q from Star Trek. Such a character can have no end of possibilities, from introducing new problems to the cast to expand on the setting and themes with authority, to just showing up and giving everyone a hard time because they're bored. It can be as sharp as a scalpel or as blunt as a mallet depending on what the story needs. All it asks is not to be overused and to be excused from solving every issue that the cast face. So, naturally he gets reduced to a secondary cast member who gets scared from being seen by a middle-aged woman. This is around the point where I stop making excuses for Jeff's writing. In an interview with Comixpedia's Xavier Cercis in 2006, Jeff Jacks is quoted as saying, "The scale of the strip seems to be slowly expanding. When I first started the comic it was just going to be about Martin and pint size, but then Faye came along, then Dora, and now I've got this fairly extensive cast of people all bouncing around inside my head." He clearly was surprised by this, as he goes on to say that he expected QC to end once the whole Martin, Faye, Dora thing was solved. but that he'd recently considered continuing the story after that and had some ideas how. A good thing too, as by this time the comic was his full-time job. A job that he's been professional about ever since. Around 250 comics a year for the past 20 years, a brace of con appearances, merch designs, fan art, other webcomics, a band. There's always some who won't consider content creation a real job. QC is a two-finger salute to that notion and the boomers and boomer likes who parade it. And most jobs don't come with an open line to a faceless horde, would like nothing more than to tell you how much you suck, or that your art isn't any good, or, these days, that it's too woke, or not woke enough, or the wrong kind of woke. Jeff has the scars to prove the unpleasantness of that last one. That hate-love relationship with his audience has gotten more uneasy as time goes by and less people engage with the site. His forums, open since the inception of the comic, shut down in 2023 and got replaced by 2 Discords. The quote on the QC TV Tropes page comes from a tweet expressing his dislike for it and, presumably, the platform. A tweet that has been mercifully archived since he decided to get banned on Twitter for impersonating Elon Musk. "My life has been better since I got off Twitter," he said in an interview to CBC Radio. Naturally, he's now on Blue Sky. Of course. The weaving of personal experiences continued, and it was actually working. Base alcoholism and its exploitation mirrors Jeff's own struggles. He started becoming interested in VTubers, so we have that in the comic as well. On the other hand, you can make a direct line from his location to the events and people who live on his comic. In an interview with the Mary Sue in 2012, he's quoted as saying, "I live in a very liberal, sexually diverse area of the US, and a good portion of the diversity on the comic is reflective on the reality in which I am privileged to live." One wonders how the comic would change if he moved to somewhere like Orson, Indiana. The world of the comic continued to change. Coffee of Doom stopped being a coffee shop where people go to be verbally abused after Faye left. Martin, now acknowledged a couple of times in comic as a bland, driveless pushover, doesn't change very much and starts disappearing from the comic unless related to Claire or Ty. Character sexuality seem to change on a whim, though that may just be me going through 20 years of comics in a week. Amusingly, one of the more consistent ones is Rocco and Bread. Jeff's favorite character moves from Hannelore to Marigold to Bubbles to Claire to Jay to who knows. When you least expect it, you realize that the robot characters are now the main driving force behind most things in the comic, and strong conflicts and emotions have been toned down in favor of occasional, long discussions about AI-human relationships and how they continue to evolve. Since Martin and Claire are in an excellent place relationship-wise, and the character roster is so full you could make an extended universe or 3, Jeff decided to write them out of the comic and send them to Cubetown, a sovereign island managed by another incredibly powerful AI, but one so alien that it can't directly understand or communicate with others. So naturally, it selects Claire, a newly minted librarian whose only previous work experience is as an intern and at the coffee shop, to run the place. A ludicrous idea until you see how disorganized Cubetown is. Then it becomes merely laughable. The concept presented enough possibilities to give her and Martin a new lease on life. Back in Massachusetts, Jeff brought a brace of new characters to the comic, all of which seem to be some flavor of useless, annoying, or annoyingly useless. And that's where the comic is. The bloated cast got bloatier, the story arcs lack focus, all characters fall by the wayside and new ones are introduced with little to make us root for them. Bring all of this together and the result is bland. Less quirky webcomic and more Sunday newspaper. The reason that this video became so complex is that I started wondering, is my experience with this comic uncommon? Well, whatever traffic stats I can find of QC tell me that it's holding or declining slowly since a final peak in November 2016. As of this video, the QC Patreon page has over 18,000 subscribers. I'm gonna go ahead and assume most of them are chucking a buck at Jeff, even if you can't join for free. Someone cares enough for the comic that they're keeping the TV Tropes pages updated on an almost daily basis, and we know it ain't Jeff because he hates that site. The merch is selling enough to remain available. All in all, 5,500 comics and some questionable decisions in, questionable content is holding. And that being said, perhaps it's time for Jeff to consider using it as a launchpad for a new project, one that's less beholden to current events and really less beholden to itself. Or If he wants to keep brand recognition, he should commit fully to the rebranding he's slowly doing. After all, few care that only 3 people from the original cast of Grey's Anatomy are still there, or that the entire cast of Law & Order was rotated a couple of times. They like the brand.